there is rumours of Logan Paul and Conor McGregor. Do you know anything about that, or is there been any talks? Welcome to In the Box Seat. Today we're joined by Azhar Muhammad Saul, Chief Operating Officer of Paradigm Sports, the powerhouse behind some of the biggest names in combat sports, from managing fighters' careers to negotiating game-changing contracts. We're going to dive right into what it takes to shape the future of combat sports. Let's get right into it. Welcome, Azhar.
Thank you, Barks. Good to meet you, and pleasure to be on the show.
Brilliant. Thanks for joining us, mate. Great to have you with us. We've got a lot to get through, so we're going to kick off straight away. And to start with, mate, is sort of what is Paradigm Sports and what do you do?
It's a good question, because a lot of people classify us as an agency, but we're essentially a platform. We're an athlete representation, business venture studio, and media platform. So we're heading into our 16th year of business now. Headquartered out of Orange County in California. It's the brainchild of my partner, who's the CEO and founder of the company, Azhar. And we started off as a very specific agency built on high growth sports, and MMA is obviously still trending in the right trajectory in terms of growth. But over the years, we've vertically integrated business ventures and a media component as well. So we get involved in a vast variety of things.
Sounds really interesting. What's your background as, and kind of how did you first become involved with Paradigm Sports yourself then?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's not this, that's for sure. My background was the financial markets. I spent over 20 years in and around the actual markets and the data that fuels the market. So did the tour of duty. I was very fortunate with my corporate career to work for three very large companies. Traveled across London, New York, Singapore, and then finally Dubai. Loved it. Very fortunate to pick up some great roles and great experiences along the way, but really got into combat sports, or the mixed martial arts rendition of combat sports during my time in Singapore. Growing up in London as a kid, football was obviously my major passion, still is. I often joke to my wife that that's the first love that never leaves you. It disappoints you regularly, but it doesn't leave you. But football and boxing, being from the UK, that really was the version of combat sports that I grew up in. But moving to Singapore and being fortunate enough to travel all over Asia, I got more and more involved in martial arts as I saw really the Asian continent as a whole. You're really 1 degree of separation away from someone that's practicing a form of martial arts, whether it's for recreation, whether it's for spirituality, or whether it's for competition. So I started to get more interested in it there. And then the business part of it is what really fueled my desire and interest, in the sense that it's still such a young sport, and the pathway to growth is still quite embryonic. So that's how my fascination got more and more fuel there. And Audi and I have been friends for a long, long time. My wife and he are kind of related through families. So I always had a cursory kind of intrigue in what he was building at Paradigm Sports. Really liked what he was building in terms of athlete advocacy and putting the athlete at the forefront of everything, and building around that. So we connected with a side business for me, but one of the ventures that Paradigm has ownership in, which is called Legend Fighting Championship, is a Chinese MMA promotion. We partnered with that several years ago now, way before the pandemic, actually. And then the opportunity to join full time just before COVID hit was there, and I didn't really bat an eyelid. It was time to sunset the corporate world and start to operate within this world.
Yeah, I mean, when an opportunity like that comes up, it's hard to turn down, I suppose, isn't it? So what's the most exciting parts of being sort of chief operating officer at Paradigm?
Everything,
yeah.
Man.
Yeah. I can imagine. Sorry, I was just going to say, I can imagine no 2 days are the same.
There's no 2 hours are the same, you know what I mean? It's like, so, the interest really is from me being involved in practically all parts of the company, everything from the finance part of our business, the operations part of our business, and the business side as well. Anything from partnerships, which could be the sponsorship endorsement deals that this business has been largely built on for the athletes over the years, through to the creation and onboarding of the business ventures themselves. So it's really that, I'm involved in practically everything. And that is both an opportunity and a challenge, in the sense that it forces you to learn on an hourly, daily basis. Yeah. Because, as I say repeatedly, we're constantly looking for answers to questions that have yet to be posed into the market. There is no reference point for what we do. We are the reference point in what we do. So daily, you're pushed to ideate, create, innovate, and find solutions.
Yeah, and I suppose, as like you were saying earlier, with it being embryonic, really, like you say, a lot of the stuff you're doing is new, isn't it? It's not been done before, so
it's not, a lot of what we do has not been done before. Whether it's the historic contracts that our team have architected over the years. We've architected the highest purses in the UFC, in Bellator, which is now PFL, in Glory Kickboxing with Rico. Through to crossover fights. There's a trend at the moment with these YouTuber type events. I mean, I have a personal perspective of what I think about those type of things, but we kind of broke the mold, if you will, and architected the first crossover fight, which is when Conor stepped into the boxing ring to fight Mayweather a number of years ago, which is now the money fight, right? So it's groundbreaking. We're in the business of disruption, and it's a word used overly, I feel, nowadays. But when you look at it from a core representation perspective, challenging the boundaries of crossover, whether it's the business ventures, whether it's the sponsorship deals. We've architected the biggest sponsorship deal in MMA history. We try to push the envelope as far and as high as possible, with the athlete first and foremost in everyone's imagination.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into those athletes a little bit later on. But before we get there, can you explain or share some sort of notable partnerships that you've kind of established at the moment with Paradigm?
Well, you can segment them into three categories, right? I mean, if you look at it from a core partnership point of view, which I define to be sponsorships and endorsement deals, we work with all the major ones. I mean, what I find generally satisfying about the way we work is that this tends to be quite an endemic sport still, right? So I'm a student of this business as well. So when I look at what other agencies and other groups are doing, they tend to focus on the low-hanging fruits, which tend to be energy drinks, apparel, fitness, that kind of stuff. And
I'm not sure if we lost you, Az.
We slightly got cut off there, yeah?
I was going to say, I think I lost you. I'm not sure. I think my connection was okay. I'm not sure if it's on your end, but no problem. What I'll do is I'll just...
We got a drop of rain in Dubai today, and that tends to slow things down a bit.
No problem. If you want to just kind of start your answer again, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I break it down into three categories, right? So from a core sponsorship or endorsement perspective, I like to push the team in terms of extending the boundary away from endemic brands, which most agencies tend to focus on, which is the low-hanging fruits, in my opinion. Energy drinks, apparel, so on and so forth. So we architected the first ever financial services deal in this industry, which was obviously something close to my heart with my background. But when Conor did the XTB deal, that was groundbreaking, absolutely groundbreaking. And every category we've worked in, whether it's betting, whether it is alcohol, whether it's apparel, I don't want to give you a laundry list of names, but they tend to be the highest deals ever negotiated in those categories. And what pleases me the most is that we work with institutions. This is a sport where I believe the institutionalization of the sport still has to grow. It still seems to be a very niche product. But my hope and my desire is that we continue to challenge the likes of the English Premier League or the NFL and the NBA and start to bring some of those blue chip labels to our athletes. And There's been examples of it before. Where we did the first ever deal for an MMA athlete with Puma and BMW, for example, right? Burger King. So that's where I feel, we distinguish ourselves quite highly. And the business ventures, we have 12 companies now in the portfolio that we've created with our athletes. Then the third section is media. Again, unscripted content has been done by us, with Conor particularly over the years. But the move into Hollywood was a big one last year with Roadhouse and the remake of Roadhouse, if you will, right? And that's the first of many movies that are coming out. Den of Thieves Part 2 comes out in a couple of weeks' time, and that features two of our clients, Michael Bisping and Rico Verhoeven. And several of our athletes do have movie offers down there. So partnerships to me is a broad gambit which covers, traditional sponsorships, the business venture portfolio, the media or movie business.
Yeah, brilliant. It sounds really exciting. I've actually met Michael Bisping once. He's a local lad. He's from the north of England. Yeah, top lad. I went to a Muay Thai event just out of the blue. God, about 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. And he was there. And you know what? He was so approachable and likable, and all that, talking to all the fans and everything. It was absolutely
They all
brilliant.
are, man. I mean, all athletes are different, right? But I tell you what distinguishes an athlete, an individual athlete, to a team athlete is I honestly feel there's a genuine sense of gratitude when someone does approach them, right? I mean, I said to you before, Barks, I'm a football guy, right? And grew up a football guy, but you can see the personality of a footballer versus an MMA athlete or boxer very clearly. There's a genuine love and there's an emotional connection, because when you follow an individual versus a team, that's a one-on-one relationship that a fan or a consumer even has chosen to follow that athlete in. A team is a bit different, So they're all very grateful if they're approached in the right way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I've met the odd one or two over the years, but most, in general, like you say, really nice guys or ladies now in a lot of instances. So let's get into the meat of it then. So what athletes do you kind of represent, and how do you choose the athletes that you like to work with?
Yeah, we have on roster over 60 athletes, and they're fairly segmented in two categories. One is developed stars, and the other section is developing stars who we believe have a ceiling of potential, a high ceiling of potential to grow into. So we tend to recruit from a number of different categories. One is obviously their technical ability, from a competition perspective. Do they have the ability and potential to become contenders or potential champions in the future? And then the way they carry themselves, what is that special sauce, that magic that they carry as human beings? Because ultimately what we're in the business in is telling stories, the real life superhero stories of these athletes, right? And that's a big part of our recruitment as well, is what is that slightly different magic ingredient that athlete carries that you could potentially now build around build a brand around and start to really accelerate the formation of a brand IP. So we look at a variety of different categories, fighting style, the ability to engage with the audience, the way they conduct themselves as professionals and their social media, and ultimately, do they have the business nous or acumen to engage with sponsors and potentially media and business ventures? So about 60 athletes on the roster. You mentioned Michael. Michael's been with us for some time now. A top quality guy, and we over the years we've really built a reputation of managing a who's who of the mixed martial arts world. Former and current champions. Conor is obviously someone that's been with us for approaching 12 years now. Michael Venom Page, your MVP, who's going to be co-headlining UFC Riyadh in just under a month's time, who's an electrifying fighter. Johnny Walker from the UFC. We've had Israel Adesanya, Leon Edwards, Hiri Prohaska. So we've had a great run. And from the female side, Chris Cyborg, and now who we believe is the not only the future star of MMA, but the current star of MMA, Dakota Ditcheva, who's not far from where you are in terms of.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I do keep a keen eye on Dakota, just with her being a Mancunian as well. So,
Yeah.
really exciting times for her. And you know what? She's absolutely, every time I've seen her on camera, she comes across brilliantly. You know, she's set for megastardom, I think, Dakota. She's got it all. I
I
think. She's got
totally agree with you. I mean,
yeah,
it's very rare you come across an athlete that has everything.
yeah,
And Dakota can be as good as she wants to be in every way. You know what I mean?
yeah,
She brings a level of violence into a cage that I haven't seen before. You know, when you look at her out of competition persona, you wouldn't realize that this girl is an absolute killer once the bell rings. And you know, her striking is incredible. I think what was great about the Taylor Santos fight is that she showed how she can fight off the clinch and how she can fight off the ground. She's nowhere near her full potential right now. It's actually quite frightening how good this girl could become.
Yeah, she's got it all, like you say. She's got the model look, but she's absolute killer as well in the cage. You know, she's got a real big future. It's really exciting times. So, how do you typically collaborate with these athletes that you've mentioned? Then, and what does a relationship look like in practice? You know, obviously you do lots of work with, you know, as using Dakota as an example. I think I've seen something recently that you kind of set up a little bit of a side venture of business. Is it a water brand?
Van Norway, yeah. So that's the business venture element I spoke about, right? So that was one we did recently. We recently announced MVP's co-ownership of Snapdown Snacks, which is a beef jerky or halal beef jerky company. So as I said, there's 12 companies all under portfolio. So from a sponsorship perspective, I know for a fact no one does the volume of deals that we do in the market. You know, our team, we're very data centric in the way we approach sponsors. And, you know, one of the things, or a couple of things I'm super proud of is not only the volume and value of deals that we bring to our athletes, but the fact we retain 98% of our sponsors as well, because we are so focused on the value we add to the brand in addition to the client. And that starts to then, you know, allow these deals to become multiple year deals and long-term partnerships. So that's great. The venture side's just, you know, that's a very exciting area, because the case in point was when we first launched proper number 12 Irish whiskey just after the Mayweather McGregor fight. And that was really the beginnings of understanding what a client's IP or brand IP could look like, where rather than taking, you know, several $100,000 or several $1 million in terms of a sponsorship revenue, you know, relationship, if you can go out there, source strategic capital, bring on a shrewd operating partner, because I know next to nothing about running an alcohol company as I do, you know, a beef jerky company, right? So we want to partner with black belts from their sector who are able to operate those businesses for us, and then sprinkle the magic dust of the athlete endorsement on top and ownership. It's a recipe for success if it's executed correctly. So Dakota's one, it's a great category for her to be in. It's a natural water sourced out of the fjords of Norway and come through all kinds of rocks for purification. pH testing is super pure, and that's the way she lives her life. You know, when we look at alignment, she's an athlete that cares a lot about clean living, clean eating, dedicated to her regime, which is why she gets the results she gets. So organically aligning those relationships to the athlete is what takes, you know, a $10 million company up to a $100 million company and beyond very quickly.
Yeah. Do you know what? I think it's absolutely brilliant as well, because as a boxing fan myself, you know, for all my life, the amount of times that we've had boxers that have retired or gone to the grave with not a pot to piss in, basically, or, you know, not a penny to the name. I think it's absolutely brilliant, you know, that you've got that kind of element as well, where it's looking at, you know, post-career as well, which is brilliant, you know.
It's a fundamental part of our DNA, Parks, right? You know, when Aldi created this company 15, 16 years ago, like I said, athlete advocacy was first and foremost. You know, he was an agent for an NFL agency at the time. And that's where the misalignment of frequency between the interests of the athlete and the teams or the leagues really resonated with him. You know, he played American football at UCLA and was really seen as a captain of the dressing room. You know, players would come to him not only for counsel and advice on their contracts, but also financial advice. So, you know, this is before the social media rise and everything, but how they present themselves to media. So when Paradigm was created, it really was, you know, like I say, putting the athlete at the forefront of everything and making sure that, you know, we built an operating system which took clients away from the debt stack of society and brought them into the equity stack of society for ownership. You know, careers are short, box, very short. Yeah. You mentioned boxing, MMA is the same. You know, one split second misjudgment, a head kick, an elbow or a punch, and your career may never be the same again, right?
Yeah.
And guess what? It's a very disloyal industry too. You know, those brand partners that are with you then may not necessarily be with you in the future. So if you own those businesses and you're vested in the growth of those businesses, that's a great way of rewarding those athletes for their loyalty and getting them paid substantial amounts in the back end.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Brilliant it is. So moving on then, you mentioned, you know, you were involved with the Conor McGregor Mayweather fight and Conor's UFC contracts as well. But can you share sort of Paradigm's role in those instances? So take us back to the Mayweather fight, for example. Then, you know, what was your role in that?
Well, it wasn't mine, I was still in the financial world, still kicking around with data and Audi was the architect.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember the famous words that Dana said when the idea was first floated to the UFC. I think the words were, there's more chance of him becoming the starting quarterback of the New England Patriots than that fight actually happening. But that's when, you know, the advent of social media and the fact that, as I said to you before, there's this emotional currency that develops between the fighters and their audience. And then Floyd started speaking about it, Conor started speaking about it, and they spoke it into existence, you know, because ultimately, what does everyone want? They want to please the viewer, the consumer. So as the energy generated that, at that point, Conor was a two-weight world champion in the UFC, replicating what he'd done at Cage Warriors, you know, and the intrigue of, can he actually be done? Can somebody cross over from mixed martial arts into boxing, basically handicap themselves in 90% of their attacking arsenal and take on the greatest defensive fighter of our generation, right? And the noise started to develop, the interest and intrigue started to develop. And before you know it, there was a significant demand enough for the fight to take place. And as you can see from the pay-per-view records, it blew the numbers through the roof, that fight.
Yeah, I remember at the time, obviously, people were a bit like, from my sort of experience, people were a little bit like, oh, it's not a fight I really want to see. But then as it got made and it got nearer, it started, it really did create a lot of intrigue, and people were like, oh, can he actually do it? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it was really interesting.
He convinced me. I took a very long flight from Singapore to Vegas to watch it because I was fully convinced.
Yeah.
Well, he's going to Mayweather.
Yeah, a lot.
It was a good fight, a really good fight. You know, the first few rounds, I thought Conor conducted himself and showed he has the ability to step into that boxing ring. And the experience showed in the end, the different moves and looks a boxer will show you after 30, 40 years of doing the same thing over and over again. But it was a fun fight for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And just while we're on it as well, there is rumours of Logan Paul and Conor McGregor. Do you know anything about that, or is there been any talks with yourselves at all?
Well, the funny thing with Conor is that there's talks every week.
Yeah.
Somebody's calling him out every week, and that's the attraction he still has within the sport, and the personality of the man is that, even though he's still, after that, horrific leg break 3.5 years ago, people are still clamoring to see him fight somebody. He shows you not only the enduring allure of him being in competition again, but also the fact that the sport is a better sport for having him around. So it's one of several offers that continue to come onto the table, but he will be in competition, God willing, this year. He's certainly focused on getting back into the UFC octagon this year. But if other opportunities arise, then we'll see how that develops.
Yeah, brilliant, fantastic. So, can you detail then, as for us, for our viewers out there, what contract negotiation looks like, and maybe some of the toughest negotiations you've been involved with?
They're all tough. They're all tough. And if you're doing your job right as a manager of an athlete, they should be tough. You know, it's the old adage of negotiation. You don't take the first offer that comes your way. You know, that's the start of the negotiation. So, you know, we push the envelope aggressively, and that's why we've got the results that we've got over the years, right? I mean, contract negotiations are generally tense, but good business always gets done in the end. You know, ultimately, we want to be good partners to all the promotions that we work with, whether they're the global promotions such as the UFC or the PFL or even the regionalized ones, you know. So we understand what it means to build a business and how margins need to be protected. But ultimately, we have a responsibility to each athlete on the roster as well to make sure they're maximizing the most from their careers from an economic sense. So good business gets done, but negotiations can be as long as they need to be in order to carve the right deal. I mean, this industry is still very young, Box, right? You know, when you look at the overall pay, fighter pay, which has been heavily debated for years now, we've come a long way, but we've got a long, long way still to go. You know, when you look at football, you look at NFL, NBA, MLS, you know, from a pay to revenue ratio perspective, those sports pay upwards of 50 to 60% of their revenues to their players, right? When we first started out in this industry, it was 6%. We're now floating around the 18% mark. We've come a long way, right? Yeah. But it just shows you there's still so much more for us to push on behalf of the athletes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm quite naive, really, when it comes to contracts and stuff in this instance. So can you explain what it would look like? So say, just as an example, say Logan Paul and Conor McGregor kind of, you know, it was on. What would your role be within that? Would you sit down and negotiate how much each fighter would get paid and stuff like that? How does it work from that?
I mean, that's a little bit of an outlier because that you could classify that as a non-traditional event, right? It's a crossover fight, if you will.
Right. Okay.
But you know, speaking to that and speaking to our core business, which is MMA contracts with the UFC and PFL, the key tenets are really about, you know, fighters aren't salaried, Barks, right? They're independent contractors. Yeah. So they fight, they get paid. And that's why it's a very lonely sport. You know, they don't have the benefit of medical insurance, health insurance, salaries, income protection, illness protection. So activity is important. So when we look at contracts, it's making sure that there's two components, three for the top athletes. One is the show money. What's the guarantee you're going to get for showing up, making weight, and fighting, right? So pushing the envelope as much as possible. And we will use data is a fundamental part of our negotiations for that part of it. Then there's a bonus for some fighters where if you win, so it's called a show and win. If you win, you get an additional bonus on top. And then for the very top needle movers, there's a percentage of pay-per-view that's negotiated as well. So that's another element to it. And then the other thing is we don't want our fighters held to restrictive contracts either. So we want to see a minimum number of fights that they guaranteed or offered per year. And we don't want them held to long multi-year contracts where they're held inactive for a long period of time, right? Again, they don't fight, they don't earn, right? So that's there's a lot of moving parts to crafting the right contract for the athlete.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Really interesting and quite tricky, I can imagine. So,
very tricky.
Yeah, you definitely earn your money, don't you?
It's easy. Anyone want to do it.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So just talking back to the kind of business side of it then, do you kind of find that most fighters and entrepreneurs have a sort of similar mindset, would you say?
Yeah.
That discipline side of things.
You've hit the point there. It's the focus and discipline, you know, because to be an entrepreneur, to build a business, it's tough. It's hand-to-hand combat every single day, whether you're talking to the promotions for contract negotiations, whether you're dealing with social media or crisis management, whether you're dealing with brand partners or business ventures, you know, everything is challenging. And I find that athlete DNA is very, very similar to an entrepreneur's. I've often said that the business world and sporting world are classic laboratories for success for each other. because to be an elite athlete, you have to have a particular mindset, resilience, focus, discipline. To build a company, you need all three.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So it's great that you've got that hand in hand, working on the combat, but also working on the entrepreneurial stuff, which is brilliant. So where do you see the future of combat sports then, Az? And are there any sort of new trends or technologies that are going to shape the industry?
Yeah, man. I mean, look, this is still such a young business. I mean, if you think about how far this has grown, I mean, if you look at the data points that are public, the story is very famous with the UFC. Dana White and the Fertitta brothers bought this thing in 2001 for $2 million. Bleeding money. It was unscripted content with the launch of The Ultimate Fighter, which really put it into the public domain. And they sold it to WME IMG in, I think, 2016 for $4.2 billion, right? That's some return. That's a 70% a year-on-year return since the acquisition. Now, last year, as you know, they joined forces with the WWE, and it's listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker TKO. Current valuation of the UFC is over $12 billion now. So it shows you that the rate of growth, and it's blown other sports and leagues apart. There's still a lot of growth to go. I love the cross-pollination of the UFC fan base with the WWE fan base, because that's attracting a younger demographic to the sport. I firmly believe, and my hope is that those younger kids at some point want to see real fighting. So that's going to be a whole new demographic of audience coming into the sport. And we're seeing it now. When you look at Gen Z or Gen Z, and I speak too much to Americans, it's Gen Z, right? 30 to 40% of Gen Zs watch combat sports. That's the biggest growing aspect of their sports consumption, because their attention span isn't great. To sit through a 3-4 hour NFL game, you're going to lose a lot of that generation. But quick, bite-sized knockouts, viral, sensational knockouts is what's capturing their imagination, right? So I see this sport continuing to grow at an exponentially fast rate. And we're excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I've noticed it myself, as we was talking just before we got on air around, I did the boxing show as a radio show a few years ago, and it was just purely boxing at the time, around sort of, late 2007, 8, 9 or whatever. And it was rarely talked about, MMA and UFC and stuff like that. And now the difference is just that, myself as a fan, I was a boxing fan. Now I'm both, I'm a combat sports fan. Yeah.
Me too, man. Me too. I mean, I grew up like you probably did in the UK, getting up at 3-4 in the morning to watch Mike Tyson, Lennox Lewis, and all those guys fighting. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I love boxing, and then I still have a cursory interest in it, but there's no doubt that the MMA product has blown it away. I love what's going on across the water in Saudi Arabia at the moment with His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh and the things he's doing with boxing. I think it's creating a new product which boxing desperately needed. But MMA's very far ahead at the moment, man. Very far.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, boxing does itself no favours. I was looking at sort of some records the other day. You've got Tank Davis, who's one of the best boxers in the world. He's fought something like twice in 2 years, 2.5 years. Ridiculous. Yeah. So it does itself no favours sometimes. So what advice would you give us then?
That's a great point. You make a great point there. If you look at, one of the fighters that's garnering a lot of interest at the moment in the UFC is Alex Pereira. Right, the light heavyweight champion. Alex fought 4 or 5 times last year.
Yeah,
I mean, that's effectively a whole year in training camp. But it shows you that you go to an MMA event, whether it's UFC or PFL, you're going to get 10 to 15 fights, which are pretty much 50-50. You can't call them either way. So you're going to be sat on the edge of your seat for 3, 4, 5 hours with the unpredictability of an elbow, a punch, a kick, a submission move. Whereas boxing, I feel, has lost that a little bit. It's about the main event nowadays. I look at the attendance and these things, and you start to see, and this used to be the case 10, 15 years ago even. You look at the ringside seats, and you start to see them filling up just before the main event starts. It's empty up until then. So the interest isn't there. And that's where I think boxing needs to do itself a little bit more of a favor and start to build a better product from top to bottom.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned there with the Riyadh season, there's an interesting card in February. Don't know if you're aware of it. The Bertabiev and the Bivol rematch. Yeah. So that's a really stacked card. So that's the kind of thing you're talking about, and that's what we need, as boxing fans. So hopefully, there won't be those empty seats earlier on, because every fight's a real interesting fight.
Yeah, exactly. So, but then I'll counter with you and say the UFC event in Riyadh on 1st of February, you got Israel Adesanya, main event, Michael Venom Page against Shara Bullet, co-main event. Look down the card. It's a fight night. It's not a pay-per-view.
Oh, it's stacked.
And it is stacked.
Yeah,
right?
Totally. Yeah. But like I say, that's what, I was just, saying sort of the boxing, that's what it needs, to compete now, because it really needs to step its game up. But really interesting. And I think it's good for both sports, actually, because I think both are pushing each other on. Do you know what I mean? To have to produce these kind of.
In any business, man, you need competition. Competition drives you forward. It drives you to innovate. It drives you to create. And it forces you to be agile in your business model. If you're on your own, you can get complacent, and that's what none of us want to be.
That's it. So what advice would you give then to kind of aspiring fighters looking to make it in combat sports? And what should they look for in a management agency?
You've got to look out. I mean, look, I see this regularly, right? There's no secret to this sport, right? To be successful, you have to have the three tenets I spoke about: focus, discipline, commitment. And then the team is ultra crucial, because in my belief, the most exploited talent out there are the fighters. When that star starts to ascend, you start to see the hawks, magpies, and vultures descending from everywhere to want to be involved in it. And fighters have to realize who's been in their corner and who has their best interests at heart. That's not always going to be the person that tells you what you want to hear. I say this to my kids as well. A true friend is the person who's going to tell you what you don't want to hear when you need to hear it. And that's the job of a strong manager or agent, is really to be that counsel, the mentor, the counsel, the guide, the elder brother or sister figure, right? It's an extended part of the family to build these athletes up and look after their interests. It's important to have that right team around you and never deviate too far away from it.
Yeah, no, totally agree. So if you could change one thing, guys, about the combat sports industry, what would it be and why?
Still carrying the cough from the earlier in the week. Sorry, can you repeat the question, Box?
Yeah, sorry, I was just saying, if you could change one thing about the industry, the combat sports industry, what would it be and why?
Look, I think the way it's evolving is brilliant. From a technology perspective, I like the growth in there. The fact that the OTT platforms and the democratization of viewing is happening under our purview now, with the likes of Netflix, Amazon, DAZN, Stars Play beginning to stream live events is great for the sport. It's the fighter part of it where I feel there still needs to be a lot more work done in. And again, when you look at what football team you support, Box?
I'm not really a football fan as such. I do watch it, but it's a delicate subject. This I'm a purple, so obviously I'm Manchester. So United and City. So I like City and I like United, but I'll go to either.
Good for you.
I know that's rare.
You do that in North London, man. You can't be Arsenal.
No, I know. Yeah, I do get stick for it, to be fair.
Let me give you the example. When a kid is discovered, and they become discovered at a very young age nowadays, from 4 or 5 years of age, from a talent perspective, you get to see and identify high quality, high potential talent. In those type of sports, traditional stick and ball sports, there's academies, there's incubation centers, there's performance centers, there's associations, there's unions now to take the journey of that athlete from the age of 4 or 5 to the professional ranks at 16, 18, right?
Yeah.
Nothing exists in combat sports. It's a very lonely path. And with the absence of a strong team, I see a lot of talent fall by the wayside because they haven't got that infrastructure around them to support them. And that support could be financial. It could be from a training perspective. It could be from a mentoring perspective, a coaching perspective. It doesn't exist. So I want to see more and more companies like us continue to push the boundaries to create that ecosystem of care and diligence around the athlete across, through their growth as professional fighters.
Yeah, it's a great point, actually. It's something I've not really thought about before, but it is a great point. And what also I've noticed as well in this industry is you can get a lot of kind of fly-by-night merchants who turn up one day, they've been to one boxing match or one MMA match, they get themselves a file of facts. Next minute, they think they're an agent and that kind of thing. And I suppose you come across a lot.
How many of you still know what file of facts are?
Well, I know, yeah, show me age there, aren't I? But no, it's kind of, it is an industry that can be quite like that, really, can't you? You can get people off the street.
With the lack of unionization and association, the barriers to entry are incredibly low. Yeah. But to your point, anyone can rock up at a gym and call themselves an agent and sign a kid up. But without the business acumen and the sporting acumen, and this is something we pride ourselves a lot on, is that I feel we have black belts or black belt potential people within our team, whether it's social media, whether it's sponsorships, business ventures. When a client comes into our environment or our agency or management company, if you will, they're going to have people that speak the language of sport fluently, speak the language of legal terms on contracts fluently, and the language of business fluently. And that's the key part, and that's where you're going to build something special for that athlete and ultimately build them a rewarding career. Can't say the same for everyone else in that business.
Well, that's it. And that's what sets you apart. And that's why you guys are where you are, because you've got that in place. Makes sense. So what's next then for yourself and Paradigm Sports? Are there any sort of exciting projects or athletes that we should keep an eye on?
I mean, some of the younger athletes coming through for sure. We've got some high hopes for some of them. Cedric Doumbé, I think, is going to be a major international star this year from the PFL. Jacob Nedo in the PFL, light heavyweight European champion, I think, had a tough global season last year where he fought the last champion and had a really tough season. But I think Jacob's going to come into his own this year. Dakota's star will continue to grow at a very high rate. We're working through the dynamics of what her year looks like now in terms of competition. And, I'm excited about MVP in Saudi. I think, it's going to be an exciting year with him this year with the activity he's got planned. The return of Conor hopefully this year. And, I see some exciting fights in the horizon, but I'm almost more excited by the business opportunities that are coming our way. We've got several ventures and partnerships that we're working on that I'm going to be excited to announce over the next few weeks and months, which will continue to push the envelope for these guys.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's really exciting times, really. I'm like we said, mentioned earlier on, I'm kind of looking forward to the Dakota stuff, that little bit more, just with it being a local girl, you know what I mean? Really interested in that.
Of course.
Yeah. So how can fighters or athletes or even fans get in touch with Paradigm, if they're interested in kind of sort of finding out more about your...
Yeah, we're fairly active on social media, man. So, the Instagram page is there and, I'm on there, but, obviously I'm focused more on the business and finance and operations side. So I tend to speak a lot through LinkedIn, but the traditional platforms is where you'll find us.
Yeah. Brilliant. And have you got any final messages or anything you'd like to share with the fans of combat sports that you'd like to leave with?
Yeah, look, it was a brilliant 2024, whether you're from the boxing version or the MMA version. But honestly, I can't wait for what's in plan for this year. There's going to be some amazing, not only fights, but new locations to go to. Residing in Dubai, I think there's going to be 4 to 6 major pay-per-view events coming out of Dubai. The PFL announced a partnership with through the Crown Prince, Sheikh Hamdan, with the PFL 3-4 weeks ago. The first event is on our doorstep on the 25th of January. That'll be a series of events coming to Dubai. So all over the world, this is a product which, every country, every region can identify with. I often laugh that before stick or ball was created, what was the sport? 2 people fighting. So it's a language everyone can understand. So I'm excited about the volume of events going on this year, but also the fact that more people will be able to watch it and consume that content.
Real good stuff. And have you got anything in the UK coming up soon?
Obviously going to be UFC fights coming on, in London, and Probably Manchester, I would have thought, and Dakota's keen, obviously, on the PFL, putting on the Manchester card for her homecoming. So that's always going to be an important market. I think the UFC guys have seen it now. When you bring that terrace type atmosphere to a UFC event or PFL event, it hits differently, man. I mean, I've been fortunate to attend events all over the world, but a UK event is just crazy, man, with the singing and all sorts of
like it.
Football crowd, the rugby crowd coming to a fight, and those are two really interesting ingredients for an atmosphere.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, fantastic, Az. It's been absolutely a pleasure to have you on today. Some really interesting stuff. Obviously we're going to follow closely what it is you're doing, but hopefully we can get you on again in the future, when you've got things coming up, and maybe we can talk about it and share the news and that kind of thing. That'd be great.
Love to.